I'm going back to my ex. My wife said after 15 years. I never really loved you. I just nodded. The next day, her own lawyer called her, his voice cracking. The house, the accounts. My God, what did you say to him yesterday? But before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The snow had been falling since noon. It was thick and silent. It covered Lake Haven in that particular Wisconsin quiet, where even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Roy Holloway's truck tires crunched through 6 inches of fresh powder as he pulled into the driveway. It was 7:15. The motion sensor light flickered on. It cast yellow light against the white snow. Through the kitchen window, Roy could see that Amelia had left every light blazing again. Electricity was not free, but she had never cared about that. He killed the engine and sat there for a moment. He watched the snow accumulate on his windshield. His hands still smelled like diesel and cold metal from a job site. They had been installing HVAC units at the new medical center all day. The wind off Lake Michigan had been brutal. His fingers ached. His back ached. But that was the work, and the work paid well. Roy Holloway had never been afraid of aching. The house looked warm from the outside. It was deceptive. He grabbed his thermos and clipboard from the passenger seat. Then he stepped out into the cold. The snow made that soft crunching sound under his boots. It was the kind that meant it would keep coming all night. He would need to get the plow attachment on the truck before morning. Maybe salt the walkway. The list of small tasks assembled itself in his mind automatically. That was how it always worked. Roy unlocked the side door and stepped into the mudroom. He stomped his boots on the mat. The warm air hit him immediately. It carried the scent of nothing. No dinner cooking, no candles, just the sterile smell of central heating, and a faint chemical trace of whatever perfume Amelia had been wearing lately. Something expensive, something new. He hung his jacket on the hook. It was the same hook he had used for 4 years. He set his thermos on the small table beside the door. His work boots stayed on. He had not decided if he was staying yet. That was the kind of thought that had been creeping in more often lately. The sense that his own house had become a place he visited rather than lived. Amelia was in the kitchen. She was leaning against the counter with her phone in her hand. She looked up when he entered. Something in her expression made him stop. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was something rehearsed. Something decided. "We need to talk," she said. Roy nodded. He had heard those words before. Months ago, when she wanted to discuss growing apart and finding herself. He had listened then, too. Listening was free, and it told you things. "Okay," he said. She set her phone down on the granite countertop. Roy had installed that countertop himself 2 summers ago. He had worked weekends. He had gotten the seams perfect. Her fingers drummed once against the surface. Then they stopped. She was gathering herself, building up to something. "I'm going back to my ex," Amelia said. The words came out flat and practiced, like she had run them past herself in the mirror. "I never really loved you." The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the basement, the furnace kicked on with a low rumble. Roy could hear the snow hitting the window in tiny whispers. He looked at her, really looked. Her hair was different, lighter, more styled. She was wearing makeup in the middle of a weekday evening. She never did that anymore. Her posture was defensive, but trying not to be. Shoulders back, chin up, like she was waiting for an explosion that would justify what she was doing. Roy nodded once. "Okay," he said. That was not the reaction she expected. He could see it in the way her eyes widened slightly, the way her mouth opened and closed. She had been ready for anger, for begging, for something she could push against. His calm was a wall she had not anticipated. "You're just accepting this?" Amelia's voice had an edge now, almost irritated, as if his lack of drama was a personal insult. Roy let his gaze drift to the wedding photo still hanging near the fridge. 5 years ago, different people. Or maybe not. Maybe this was always who they were. And he had just been too focused on building a life to notice he was building it alone. "You already left," he said quietly. You just said it out loud. Her face flushed. "Don't do that. Don't act like you know everything." "I'm not acting like anything." "You're so cold," she snapped. "This is exactly why we don't work. You don't feel anything. Roy thought about the nights he had stayed up doing paperwork so she could sleep. The mornings he had gotten up at 5 to clear her car of snow before work. The promotions he had turned down because they would have meant relocating. And she had said she could not leave Lake Haven. He thought about all of that. And then he thought about the credit card statements he had found 3 months ago. The charges from hotels he had never stayed in. Restaurants they had never visited together. I feel plenty, Roy said. I just don't see the point in performing it. Amelia rolled her eyes. That gesture he had grown to hate. The dismissiveness of it. She grabbed her purse from the counter. It was the leather bag he had bought her for Christmas. She slung it over her shoulder. I'm staying at Caleb's tonight, she said. I'll come back for my things this weekend. Caleb. So that was the ex's name. Roy filed it away in the mental folder where he kept useful information. Sure, he said. She waited, as if there might be more. When there was not, she walked past him, close enough that he could smell her perfume. Definitely new. Definitely expensive. The side door opened. It lent a gust of cold air and swirling snow. Then it closed again. Roy stood in the kitchen and listened to her car start. He listened to it reverse out of the driveway. He listened to the sound fade into the snow-muffled night. Then he walked through the house. He checked each room systematically. The bedroom they had shared. Her jewelry box was still there, but her favorite necklace was gone. The bathroom. Her toothbrush remained, but her good makeup was missing. She had taken enough for a few days, but she had left enough to claim she still lived here. Strategic ambiguity. The kind you maintain when you were not sure yet how things would play out. Roy went down to the basement, to the workshop he had built in the corner near the furnace. Behind a stack of old paint cans and lumber scraps, he pulled out a cardboard file box. Inside were folders. Each one was labeled and organized with the same precision he brought to every construction project. Financial records, tax documents, property deeds, and one folder, thicker than the others, labeled simply personal. He had started keeping it 2 years ago, when he first noticed the distance, when her stories stopped adding up, when she started needing space. Roy Holloway was not emotional, but he was not blind either. He had grown up with nothing. He learned early that hope was expensive and proof was cheap. So he had documented, quietly, thoroughly, bank statements showing whose name was on which account. The deed to the house, purchased 3 months before the wedding. Only his name on it. The business incorporation papers for Holloway Contracting, filed 5 years before he even met Amelia. Copies of credit card bills, the joint ones he had foolishly agreed to, showing charge after charge he had never authorized. And texts, saved screenshots, backed up to 3 separate drives, time-stamped and dated. Conversations with someone named C. They had started innocent and grown progressively less so. She had been sloppy about leaving her laptop open. Roy had been careful about what he did with that sloppiness. He pulled out a yellow legal pad and began writing. Task lists calmed him. They always had. There was comfort in methodology, in breaking large problems into small, manageable actions. Immediate. Change locks. Do not tell her. Call Peterson and Associates. Divorce lawyers. 8 a.m. Copy all documents. Physical and digital. Cancel joint credit cards. Document her statement. Exact words. Witness if possible. Secondary. Inventory house. Photos of everything. Secure business accounts. Change passwords. All accounts. Get new phone number. Long term. File first. Stay silent. Let her make mistakes. Roy set down the pen and looked at the list. It was not revenge. Revenge was emotional. And emotion made you sloppy. This was protection. This was making sure that the life he had built, brick by brick, invoice by invoice, did not get demolished by someone who had already admitted it meant nothing to her. Upstairs, the house settled with a creak. The snow kept falling. Roy Holloway closed the box. He returned it to its hiding place. Then he went upstairs to make a phone call. The morning came gray and cold, the kind of January dawn that never really arrived. It just grudgingly acknowledged that night was over. Roy had been awake since 5. He had always been an early riser. The construction business did not wait for comfort. But this morning had come with an edge of anticipation he had not felt in years. He made coffee. 3 cups. He worked through emails at the kitchen table while the sky went from black to charcoal. The wedding photo was still there on the wall. He would take it down later, not out of spite, but because it was a lie, and Roy did not keep lies on display. At 7:30, his phone rang. Unknown number. Roy Holloway, he answered. Mr. Holloway, this is Janet Peterson from Peterson and Associates. You called our emergency line last night regarding a divorce consultation. I did. I've reviewed your preliminary information. Can you come in today? We have a 10 o'clock available. I'll be there. He hung up and finished his coffee. The office was in Milwaukee, 40 minutes away in good weather. The snow had stopped around midnight. Everything was wrapped in white silence. But the roads would be clear by now. Wisconsin knew how to handle winter. Roy showered, shaved, and dressed in clothes that were not work clothes. Dark jeans, a button-down shirt, his good jacket. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a man who appeared exactly as calm as he felt. Some people wore their emotions on their faces. Roy had never had that problem. The drive to Milwaukee was quiet. He kept the radio off. He watched the landscape roll past. Snow-covered fields. Farmhouses with smoke rising from chimneys. The gradual transition from rural to suburban to urban. His mind worked through scenarios. Possibilities. Contingencies. Amelia would expect him to be emotional. She would expect him to fight for the marriage. To beg. To promise to change. She would be wrong. Peterson and Associates occupied the third floor of a renovated building in the Third Ward. The receptionist was efficient and polite. Within 5 minutes, Roy was sitting across from Janet Peterson herself. She was maybe 50. She had steel gray hair and the kind of direct gaze that suggested she had seen every variation of human mess. And she was not impressed by any of it. Tell me what happened, she said. Roy told her. Factually. No embellishment. Amelia's exact words. The timeline. The circumstances. Janet took notes. Her pen moved steadily across a yellow legal pad that matched the one Roy had used the night before. And you have documentation of the statement? Janet asked. Not recorded, if that's what you mean. But I can provide exact quotes and timing. Witnesses? No. Just us in the house. Janet tapped her pen against the pad. That's not ideal, but it's workable. Wisconsin is a no-fault divorce state, which means we don't technically need to prove wrongdoing. But context matters. Her admission of never loving you, combined with her immediate departure to stay with an ex-partner, establishes a pattern. Tell me about assets. This was the part Roy had prepared for. He pulled a folder from his bag. Copies of everything, organized chronologically. The house was purchased before marriage. My name only. Business was established 5 years before I met her. My name only. We have 2 joint credit card accounts, which she's been using primarily. Total debt, approximately $18,000. Savings accounts are business operational funds, registered to the company. Janet's eyebrows rose slightly. You kept it all separate? I kept it honest, Roy said. The business was mine before her. The house was mine before her. I didn't see a reason to complicate that. And she didn't ask to be added? She did. Multiple times. I said we'd discuss it after a few years. Once things were more stable. We never got there. Janet was quiet for a moment. She studied the documents. Then she looked up at Roy with something that might have been approval. Mr. Holloway, I'm going to be very direct with you. Your wife made a significant tactical error. By leaving the marital home voluntarily, by admitting to emotional fraud, her words not mine, and by failing to establish any legal claim to major assets during the marriage, she's put herself in an extremely weak position. Wisconsin law does favor equitable distribution, but equitable doesn't mean equal. It means fair based on circumstances. What are we looking at? Best case for you? You keep the house, the business, and the savings. She takes her personal property and walks away with nothing. Worst case, you might have to split some of the liquid assets. But given the business context, even that's unlikely. The joint debt is trickier. That'll probably split 50-50, which means you'll carry $9,000 of her spending. In her, she gets a very expensive lesson in how property law works. Janet closed the folder. I'll be honest, Mr. Holloway. Most of my clients come in here emotional, angry, looking for blood. You're different. That's going to work in your favor. I'm not angry. Roy said. I'm careful. I can see that. I'm going to need you to be very careful about one thing in particular. Do not communicate with her except through me once we file. No texts, no calls, no conversations. If she shows up at the house, you call the police and me. In that order. If she tries to engage you in public, you walk away. Can you do that? Yes. Good. I'll have papers drawn up by end of business tomorrow. We'll file Friday morning. After that, things move fast. She'll be served within 48 hours. She's going to be shocked, Mr. Holloway. Probably very upset. You need to be prepared for that. Roy thought about Amelia's face when she told him she never loved him. The practice calm of it. The cruelty dressed up as honesty. I'm prepared, he said. The locksmith came that afternoon. He was a weathered man in his 60s who asked no questions and worked efficiently. Roy watched him drill out the old deadbolt and install a new one. Keys jangling, metal shavings falling onto the doormat. You want me to do the back door too? The locksmith asked. All of them, Roy said. Side door, garage door, everything. You got it. 20 minutes and $300 later, Roy had a house that Amelia could no longer enter. He tested each lock himself. He felt the solid click of the mechanisms, the weight of the new keys in his palm. It was a small thing, changing locks, but small things mattered. Details mattered. He spent the rest of the afternoon taking photographs. Every room, every piece of furniture, every item of value. He moved through the house methodically, his phone clicking steadily, creating a visual record of exactly what was here and whose it was. The TV he had bought before the wedding, the couch they had picked out together, paid for with his credit card, receipts saved, her books on the shelf, his tools in the garage. The distinction was clear if you looked for it. By the time he finished, it was almost 6. The sun had already set. Winter days were short this far north. The house felt cavernous and quiet around him. He made dinner, eggs and toast. He ate standing up at the kitchen counter. He was not hungry, but fuel was fuel, and Roy had never been one to skip meals out of emotion. His phone buzzed. Text message. Unknown number. Why aren't you answering? I need to talk to you about this weekend. Amelia. She must have been texting from Caleb's phone. Roy stared at the message for a long moment. Janet had been clear. No communication. But that was after filing. Right now, he was still technically allowed. He could respond. Could tell her the locks were changed. Could tell her about the lawyers. Could watch her panic in real time. He deleted the message and blocked the number. Let her figure it out on her own. Wednesday morning, Roy went to work. The crew was framing out the new medical center's west wing. There was a problem with the load-bearing wall calculations that needed his attention. He spent 3 hours in the office trailer with blueprints and a calculator. He was double-checking the structural engineer's numbers. They were fine. The foreman was just nervous. Roy approved the work and went back out into the cold. Construction sites in winter were brutal. The kind of brutal that separated people who needed work from people who wanted it. Roy watched his crew moving through the framework. Welders throwing sparks. Hammers ringing against steel. Good people. Reliable. The business had grown slowly over 8 years. Built on reputation and repeat clients. Now Holloway Contracting had 16 employees and more work than they could handle. That success was Roy's. Built with his hands and his head. Nobody had given it to him. His phone rang at lunch. Janet Peterson. Papers are ready, she said. I'm sending them to your email now. Review them tonight. Sign them in the morning. And we'll file at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I'll be there. One more thing. As she tried to contact you. Once. I blocked the number. Good. Keep it that way. That night, Roy sat at his kitchen table with a printed copy of the divorce petition. 23 pages of legal language. Boiled down to a simple truth. The marriage was over. He read every word. Checked every detail. Made 2 minor corrections in red pen. Then he signed at the bottom. His signature was as steady as it had been on the original marriage certificate. The wedding photo was still on the wall. He took it down, frame and all. He carried it out to the garage. There was a box there, unlabeled, where he had been putting things that belonged to a previous version of his life. Old photos, letters, birthday cards with messages that had meant something once. He added the wedding photo to the collection and closed the box. Back inside, the wall had a pale rectangle where the frame had been. He would paint over it eventually, or hang something else. The house was his to do with as he pleased. His phone buzzed again. Different number. Roy, this is Amelia. I borrowed a friend's phone. We really need to talk before the weekend. Please call me. Roy blocked the number and poured himself a glass of water. The tap was cold. He could hear the wind picking up outside. Another system moving in from the northwest. More snow coming. That was fine. He had everything he needed right here. The house was quiet. The furnace hummed. Somewhere in the walls, pipes ticked as they expanded and contracted with temperature. Roy Holloway went to bed at 9:30, the same as always, and he slept without dreaming. Friday morning arrived sharp and clear. One of those winter days where the cold had teeth and the sky was so blue it hurt to look at. Roy met Janet at her office at 8:30. He signed the final documents under her watchful eye. He watched as she organized everything into a manila envelope. The courier will file these at the courthouse at 9, Janet said. Amelia will be served by end of day. After that, the clock starts ticking. She'll have 30 days to respond. And if she doesn't, then we win by default. But she'll respond. They always do. Janet paused. How are you holding up? I'm fine. You say that a lot. It's usually true. Janet smiled thinly. I've been doing this for 23 years, Mr. Holloway. I can count on one hand the number of clients who've been as composed as you. Just make sure that composure is real and not suppression. Suppressed things tend to surface at inconvenient times. It's real, Roy said. I'm not angry at her. I'm just done. Fair enough. Call me if anything happens. Otherwise, I'll be in touch when she responds. Roy left the office and drove to the job site. The work was steady. Numbers and measurements and problems that had solutions. He spent the morning reviewing the plumbing specifications for the medical center's third floor. He spent the afternoon helping the crew troubleshoot an issue with the ventilation ducting. Physical work, clean work, the kind of work where you could see progress happening in real time. Around 4 p.m., his foreman, a gravel-voiced man named Bill who had been in construction longer than Roy had been alive, found him in the trailer. Boss, you got a visitor. Roy looked up from the spreadsheet he had been reviewing. Who? Woman. Says she's your wife. I told her this is a work site, and she can't just walk in. But she's insisting. Roy's jaw tightened. Where is she? By the gate. Roy saved his work and stood up. Through the trailer's window, he could see Amelia standing by the chain-link fence. Her arms were crossed against the cold. She was not dressed for it. Thin jacket. No hat. Her car was parked awkwardly behind her. It was blocking part of the access road. Bill, Roy said, call the police. Tell them there's someone trespassing on the site. You sure about that, boss? I'm sure. Roy walked out of the trailer and across the muddy lot. Amelia saw him coming and straightened up. Her face was a mixture of anger and desperation. Roy, she called out. Finally, I've been trying to reach you for days. He stopped 10 feet away, on his side of the fence. This is a work site. You can't be here. Don't give me that. I'm your wife. You're trespassing. The police are on their way. Her eyes widened. What? You need to leave. Now. Roy, wait. I got papers today. Divorce papers. You can't just. I can, Roy said. And I did. You didn't even try to fix this. You just gave up. Roy looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes were red. Makeup was smeared slightly at the corners. She had been crying. That was new. That might even be real. You told me you never loved me, Roy said quietly. You want me to try to fix that? How does someone fix never being loved? Amelia's face crumpled. I was angry. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that. Please, she said. Her voice broke. Can we just talk? Somewhere private. In the distance, a siren wailed. Getting closer. That's your cue to leave, Roy said. Roy, go. She stared at him for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression. The desperation faded. It was replaced by something harder. Calculating. This is about money, isn't it? She said. You're punishing me because of money. Roy did not answer. I'll fight this, Amelia said. You think you can just kick me out of my own house? Take everything? I have rights, Roy. Talk to your lawyer about your rights. Roy turned and walked back toward the trailer. Behind him, Amelia was shouting something about fairness and betrayal. But Roy was not listening anymore. Bill was standing by the trailer. phone in hand, watching with the careful neutrality of someone who had seen enough marital disputes to know better than to get involved. The police arrived 5 minutes later. By then, Amelia was gone. Over the weekend, Roy worked on the house. Not repairs. Everything was in good condition already. But reclamation, making it his again. He moved furniture. He rearranged the living room. He took down artwork that had been Amelia's choice and replaced it with nothing. Empty walls were honest. They did not pretend to be something they were not. Sunday afternoon, his phone rang. Attorney Patrick Rourke, according to the caller ID. Amelia's lawyer, presumably. Roy answered. This is Roy. Mr. Holloway, my name is Patrick Rourke. I'm representing Amelia Holloway in your divorce proceedings. I'm calling to see if we can have a civilized conversation about resolution before this gets ugly. I have a lawyer. You should talk to her. I prefer to talk to you first. Sometimes lawyers make things more adversarial than they need to be. Roy almost smiled. Classic tactic. Try to negotiate around the attorney. Catch the emotional spouse off guard. Secure concessions they would not make with counsel present. Mr. Rourke, Roy said, I'm not emotional. I'm not off guard. And I'm not making any decisions without my lawyer present. If you want to discuss this case, call Janet Peterson. Mr. Holloway. Roy hung up. 30 seconds later, a text from the same number. We can make this easy or we can make this expensive. Your choice. Roy forwarded the text to Janet with a simple note. Amelia's lawyer tried to contact me directly. Blocked. Janet's response came immediately. Good. They're fishing. That means they're worried. On Monday morning, Roy received a formal letter from Patrick Rourke's office. It arrived via courier, hand-delivered to the construction site office. Marked urgent. Roy opened it in front of Bill, who was filling out time sheets at the other desk. Bad news? Bill asked. Posturing, Roy said. The letter was 3 pages of legal rhetoric, boiled down to a simple demand. Amelia wanted the house, half the savings, and spousal support while she transitioned to independence. In exchange, she would graciously allow Roy to keep his business. Roy read it twice. Then he set it aside. You okay? Bill asked. Fine. You've been saying that a lot lately. Still true. Bill shrugged and went back to his paperwork. He had worked for Roy long enough to know when to push and when to stay quiet. This was a stay quiet moment. Roy called Janet. I got the demands, he said. I figured you would. They're ridiculous, for the record. She has no legal basis for any of it. So what happens now? Now we respond. Officially, in writing. And we make it clear that her options are to accept the division of assets as stated in your filing, or to spend the next year in court losing slowly. How long until that response goes out? I'm writing it now. It'll file tomorrow. Make it clear, Roy said. Clear as glass, Janet promised. That night, Roy cannot sleep. Not from anxiety. He had long since made peace with the outcome, but from a persistent hum of energy that came with waiting for the next move. He got out of bed at midnight and went down to the kitchen. He made coffee. He sat at the table with his laptop. The house was quiet around him. His house, bought with his money, maintained with his labor, secured with his foresight. Amelia had lived here, yes. She had filled it with her presence, her opinions, her drama, but she had never owned it. Not legally, not spiritually. She had been a guest who had overstayed her welcome. Roy opened his email and started drafting a message to Bill about next week's schedule. Work was a good distraction. Work was always a good distraction. His phone buzzed. Text message. Another unknown number. I know what you're doing. You're trying to make me suffer. But I'm not going to let you destroy me. Signed A. Roy stared at the message for a long time. Then he blocked the number and went back to his email. She thought he was trying to destroy her. He was not. He was just refusing to save her from herself. Wednesday afternoon, Janet called with an update. Patrick Rourke called me this morning. He's in a difficult position. How so? His client told him she'd been an equal partner in the marriage, that she contributed financially, that her name was on the accounts, that the house was purchased during the marriage. None of that is true, and he's just now figuring it out. Roy said nothing. He asked me, specifically, if there was any room for negotiation. I told him we'd be willing to discuss dividing the joint credit card debt fairly, meaning she takes the portion she incurred, which is about $14,000 of the $18,000 total. And He said he'd discuss it with his client and get back to me. That means no. That means she's not ready to accept reality yet. Give her time. Reality has a way of being persistent. Roy hung up and went back to work. The medical center was ahead of schedule. The weather had been cooperating, and the client had just approved funding for the second phase. Good news all around. He immersed himself in the work, in the clean logic of weight and stress and load calculations. Around 5 p.m., Bill found him again. Boss, heads up. Your wife, ex-wife, whatever, to try to get past security at the front gate again. Pete turned her away, but she was pretty worked up about it. Did she leave? Eventually. Took some convincing. Roy nodded. Thanks for the heads up. You want us to be on alert for her? Just follow protocol. She's not allowed on site. If she shows up again, call the police and call me. You got it, boss. That night, Roy got home to find someone had been in his mailbox. The flag was up. The box was open. Some of his mail was scattered on the ground. Nothing missing, just disturbed. He gathered the envelopes. Mostly junk. One bill. He looked around the quiet street. 2 houses down. Mrs. Walker was watering her plants in the window. She was watching him with the studied casualness of someone who had seen something but was not sure if they should say something. Roy walked down to her house and knocked. She opened the door, still holding her watering can. Roy, hello. Mrs. Walker, did you see someone in my mailbox earlier? She hesitated. Then she nodded. Your wife. I thought maybe she was just getting the mail. She doesn't live here anymore. Oh, Mrs. Walker's expression softened with understanding. I'm sorry to hear that. Don't be. But if you see her around the property again, would you mind calling me? Of course. Roy gave her his number. He thanked her. Then he walked back to his house. Inside, he checked every room, every window, every lock. Nothing disturbed. Nothing taken. She had just been at the mailbox. Looking for what? Evidence? Documents? Information she could use? It did not matter. She would not find anything. Roy made dinner. Chicken and rice. Simple and efficient. He ate while reviewing the next week's project timeline. Food was fuel. Time was money. Dwelling on Amelia's desperation was not productive. His phone rang. Janet. Quick update, she said. Patrick Rourke just filed a motion for temporary support. He's asking the court to order you to pay Amelia's living expenses during the divorce proceedings. Can he do that? He can ask. The court will deny it. She voluntarily left the marital home. She's employed, and she has no dependents. There's no basis for temporary support. When's the hearing? Week after next. Don't worry about it. I'll handle it. But Roy did worry about it. Not emotionally. That would be wasted energy. But tactically, she was escalating. That meant she was desperate. Desperate people made mistakes. But they also made messes. He needed to be ready for both. The days ground on. Work continued. The medical center's framing was complete. They were moving into the more technical phases. Electrical, plumbing, HVAC. Roy spent his days in meetings with subcontractors. He spent his nights in the quiet of his house, reviewing documents, preparing for scenarios. Amelia tried to contact him 3 more times. Once through his work email. How she got that, he was not sure. Once through a mutual friend who called asking if Roy would at least hear her out. And once by showing up at his regular coffee shop on Saturday morning. That last one surprised him. He had been sitting by the window, reading the news on his phone. When he looked up, he saw her walking in. She spotted him immediately. Obviously, that was why she was there. She started walking over. Roy stood up. He gathered his things, and he walked out. Roy, she called after him. Roy, please. He got in his truck and drove home. In his rearview mirror, he could see her standing on the sidewalk. Her arms were wrapped around herself against the cold. She looked lost. Part of him felt something that might have been pity. Most of him felt nothing at all. The hearing for temporary support happened on a gray Thursday morning. Roy sat beside Janet in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and anxiety. Amelia sat across the aisle with Patrick Rourke. She looked different, smaller. Her hair was not as carefully styled. She was wearing clothes Roy recognized from 2 years ago. Either she was playing poor for the judge, or things actually were not going well. Possibly both. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Harriet Voss, listened to Patrick's arguments with an expression of professional skepticism. Your Honor, Patrick said, My client left an economically abusive situation. Mr. Holloway controlled all finances. He refused to add her name to any assets, and he has now locked her out of the marital home without warning. She has no access to funds, no place to live. And, Mr. Rourke, Judge Voss interrupted. Did your client leave the home voluntarily? Patrick hesitated. She left to protect her emotional well-being. That's a yes. And is your client employed? She works part-time at. So that's also a yes. Miss Peterson, your response? Janet stood, calm and prepared. Your Honor, Mrs. Holloway is a fully functioning adult who made a conscious choice to leave the marital home and pursue a relationship with another party. Mr. Holloway did not force her out. He did not threaten her, and he did not restrict her access to anything that was legally hers. She left because she wanted to. The fact that she now regrets the financial consequences of that choice is not grounds for temporary support. Judge Voss looked at Amelia directly. Mrs. Holloway, where are you currently living? Amelia stood up, shaky. With my sister, Your Honor. Are you paying rent? No, but do you have income from employment? Yes, but it's not enough to. Then you have housing and income. Motion for temporary support denied. Judge Voss banged her gavel once. Next case. Patrick's face went carefully neutral. Amelia looked like she had been slapped. Outside the courthouse, Janet walked Roy to his truck. That went well, she said. She's running out of moves. She is. Which means she'll either accept the inevitable or try something desperate. My money's on desperate. What kind of desperate? Hard to say. Maybe she'll try to claim hidden assets. Maybe she'll accuse you of something dramatic to gain leverage. Just stay clean. Stay documented. And don't engage. I haven't engaged. I know. Keep it that way. Roy drove back to work. The day continued as days did, with work and numbers and problems that had solutions. But Janet had been right about desperate. 3 days later, Roy came home to find police cars in his driveway. The police officers were standing on his porch when Roy pulled up. His first thought was remarkably calm. Someone had broken in. His second thought, equally calm, was that it had probably been Amelia. His third thought was how thoroughly he had documented everything in the house, and how that documentation was going to be very useful very soon. He parked behind the squad car and walked up to the porch. One of the officers, a young guy who could not have been more than 25, turned to face him. Are you Roy Holloway? I am. We received a call about a domestic disturbance at this address. Roy looked at his house. The door was closed. The windows were intact. Everything looked exactly as he had left it this morning. There's no disturbance here, Roy said. I live alone. Your wife called. Said you'd locked her out of the house and taken her belongings. My soon-to-be ex-wife, Roy corrected. And yes, I changed the locks. She moved out voluntarily last month and is currently engaged in divorce proceedings. The house is in my name only. Purchased before marriage. The officer looked uncertain. His partner, an older woman with sharp eyes and the bearing of someone who had seen every variation of domestic drama, stepped forward. Do you have documentation of ownership? She asked. I do. It's inside. Would you like to see it? Please. Roy unlocked the door. The new locks clicked smoothly. He led both officers inside. The house was exactly as he had left it. Clean, organized, impersonal. He walked to the kitchen table where he kept a file box with copies of important documents. He pulled out the property deed. The older officer examined it carefully. This shows sole ownership. Purchased 2020. Your marriage was 2021, Roy said. April. She handed the deed back. Your wife also claimed you've been threatening her. Roy felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger, not fear, just the recognition that this was the desperate move Janet had predicted. I haven't communicated with her in weeks, Roy said. All contact goes through our attorneys. I have no reason to threaten her. And I haven't. She seemed pretty upset on the phone. I'm sure she was. She's realizing the divorce isn't going to go the way she expected. The officers exchanged glances. The older one pulled out a notebook. I'm going to need your attorney's contact information, she said. And hers, if you have it. Roy provided both. The older officer stepped outside to make a call. The younger one stood awkwardly in the living room. He looked at the bare walls and the neat furniture. like he was trying to piece together a story that made sense. 5 minutes later, the older officer came back inside. I spoke with both attorneys, she said. Yours confirms no contact. And, interestingly, hers says she's been trying to contact you repeatedly and getting no response. That checks out with what we're seeing here. So we're not filing charges. But I'm going to document this call. If she contacts us again with false reports, that's harassment. But Mr. Holloway, I'd suggest you consider a restraining order if this continues. I'll discuss it with my attorney. The officers left. Roy watched them talk to Amelia. She was sitting in her car at the end of the block. Of course she was, waiting to see if the police would drag him out in handcuffs, or arrest him, or whatever fantasy she had constructed. When the officers did not do any of that, when they just got in their car and drove away, Amelia stayed there for another 10 minutes before finally leaving. Roy closed the door. He locked it. Then he called Janet. She filed a false police report, he said. I heard. The officer called me. I'm documenting it. This actually helps us. It shows a pattern of escalating behavior and false claims. If this goes to court, it undermines her credibility. She's not going to stop. Probably not. But every time she does something like this, she hurts herself more than she hurts you. Just keep your head down. Roy hung up and stood in his kitchen. He looked at the space where the wedding photo used to be. The wall was still blank. He still had not decided what to hang there. Maybe nothing. Maybe blank was better. Honest. The next 2 weeks were quieter. Amelia did not call the police again. She did not show up at his house. She did not try to access the property. Radio silence. Roy knew better than to think it was over. Silence just meant planning. But he took advantage of it. He worked. He prepared. He documented. The court date was set for mid-February. Final divorce hearing. Judge Voss again. Roy marked it on his calendar and kept working. The medical center project was wrapping up the rough work and moving into finishing. Roy spent his days managing subcontractors, reviewing punch lists, handling the 1,000 small details that turned construction into completion. It was satisfying work, concrete work, the kind of work where you could see progress happening. One evening, Bill asked him to stay late to look at a problem with the ventilation system in the north wing. They stood in the half-finished hallway. Flashlights pointed at ductwork, discussing solutions. You seem better, Bill said eventually. Better than what? Than a few weeks ago. You were carrying something heavy. Seems lighter now. Roy considered that. I'm just waiting for things to finish. The divorce. Yeah. My second wife tried to take me for everything, Bill said. I don't talk about it much. But it was bad. Real bad. She got the house, the truck, half my tools. I was living in a motel for 8 months, eating ramen, wondering how it all went so wrong. Roy looked at him. In 6 years of working together, Bill had never mentioned a second wife. What changed? Roy asked. I did. Stop being angry. Stopped letting her live in my head rent-free. Built my life back, piece by piece. Took time, but I got there. Bill shone his flashlight along the ductwork. You're doing it different. You're not letting her take anything. That's smart. Just make sure you're not taking anything from yourself either. What does that mean? It means don't get so focused on winning that you forget what you're winning for. They fixed the ventilation issue and went home. Roy thought about Bill's words that night. He sat in his kitchen. He ate leftover pizza and reviewed Janet's most recent memo about the divorce proceedings. What was he winning for? The house, the business, the life he had built, but also something else, something harder to name. Proof, maybe. Proof that careful planning and clear thinking could protect you from chaos. Proof that you did not have to be a victim of other people's choices. Or maybe he was not winning anything. Maybe he was just refusing to lose. The call came on a Tuesday, 3rd week of February, 3 days before the final hearing. Roy, it's Janet. We need to talk. What happened? Patrick called. Amelia wants to settle. Roy set down the coffee he had been drinking. Settle how? She'll accept the original terms. No claim to the house. No claim to the business. No spousal support. If you'll agree to take all of the joint credit card debt. That's $18,000. I know. She's also asking for one concession. She wants the wedding ring back. Roy looked at his left hand. He had stopped wearing his ring 2 weeks ago. It was sitting in a drawer upstairs. White gold with a small inscription inside they had both thought was meaningful at the time. Why does she want a ring? Sentimental value, supposedly, though I suspect she wants to sell it. So I pay $18,000 and give her a ring worth maybe $2,000. And in exchange, she goes away. Essentially, yes. What do you think? Janet was quiet for a moment. Financially, $20,000 to end this cleanly is probably cheaper than continuing to court. Fighting costs money. And even though we'd likely win, litigation is expensive. But this isn't about money, Roy. This is about whether you're willing to pay her to accept what she should accept anyway. And if I say no, then we go to court Thursday, and we let the judge decide. Roy thought about it. $18,000 was a lot of money. More than he wanted to pay. More than was fair. She had racked up that debt, buying things for herself. Things he had never agreed to. Charging thousands to cards he had stupidly agreed to open with her. But if he paid it, she was gone. No appeals. No complications. Just done. Tell Patrick no, Roy said. We go to court. You're sure? I'm sure. She made her choices. She can live with them. Okay. I'll let him know. See you Thursday morning at 8. Thursday came cold and bright. One of those late winter days where the sun was brilliant but offered no warmth. Roy dressed carefully. Not a suit, but clean slacks and a button-down shirt. His good jacket. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw someone who appeared exactly as calm as he felt. The courthouse was busier than last time. Roy met Janet in the hallway outside the courtroom. She briefed him quickly. Patrick's going to make a last-minute push for equitable distribution. He'll argue that Amelia contributed to the marriage in non-financial ways and deserves compensation. He'll probably bring up the credit card debt and try to pin it all on you. None of it will work. But he has to try. What I need to do? Be yourself. Answer questions truthfully. Don't get emotional. I'm not emotional. Janet smiled slightly. I know. They went into the courtroom. Amelia was already there with Patrick, sitting at the defendant's table. She looked up when Roy entered. For a brief moment, their eyes met. She looked exhausted, defeated, like someone who had been fighting a war she had already lost but could not figure out how to surrender. Roy looked away first, not out of guilt, just because there was nothing left to see. Judge Voss entered. Everyone stood, and the hearing began. Patrick spoke first, laying out his case. It was more restrained than Roy had expected. No dramatic accusations. No claims of abuse or control. Just a straightforward argument that Amelia deserved something for the years she had spent in the marriage. Your Honor, Patrick said, while it's true that Mr. Holloway owned the house before marriage, and while it's true that his business was established independently, the fact remains that my client contributed to the household in countless ways. She managed the home. She supported his career. Mr. Rourke, Judge Voss interrupted. Do you have evidence of financial contribution? Not direct financial contribution, but do you have evidence that Mrs. Holloway's name was supposed to be added to any assets? Mr. Holloway verbally promised to. Verbal promises made during a marriage are not legally binding in property disputes. Do you have anything else? Patrick shuffled his papers. Your Honor, we'd asked the court to consider equitable distribution based on the length of the marriage and my client's reasonable expectations. Those are not grounds for overriding documented sole ownership. Miss Peterson, Janet stood. Your Honor, the facts are clear. Mr. Holloway purchased the house before marriage. He maintained it with his income, and he never added Mrs. Holloway's name to the deed. His business was established years before they met. It has been maintained as a separate legal entity. The only joint assets are credit card accounts, which Mrs. Holloway used primarily for personal expenses. There is no basis for equitable distribution because there is nothing to distribute. My client is willing to split the credit card debt 50-50, which is more generous than the circumstances warrant. Judge Voss looked at Amelia. Mrs. Holloway, do you have anything to add? Amelia stood slowly. She looked at the judge, then at Roy, then back at the judge. Your Honor, she said. Her voice was shaking. I know I made mistakes. I know I said things I shouldn't have. But I was married to him for 4 years. That has to count for something. It counts, Judge Voss said. It counts as 4 years of marriage that is now ending. But it does not create ownership where ownership never existed. I'm sorry, Mrs. Holloway, but the law is clear. So I just walk away with nothing? Amelia's voice broke. After everything, you walk away with what you brought into the marriage and what you earned during it. That's how property law works. Judge Voss reviewed the documents in front of her. She made a few notes. Then she looked up. I'm ruling in favor of Mr. Holloway. The house remains his sole property. The business remains his sole property. The joint credit card debt will be split equally. Mrs. Holloway is responsible for $9,000. Mr. Holloway for $9,000. No spousal support. Mrs. Holloway has 30 days to collect her personal belongings from the marital home, supervised if necessary. This marriage is dissolved. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Amelia made a sound. Half sob, half gasp. She collapsed back into her chair. Patrick put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook it off. She covered her face with both hands. Roy sat still. He felt nothing dramatic. No surge of victory. No rush of relief. Just the quiet satisfaction of a problem finally solved. A chapter finally closed. Judge Voss stood. This court is adjourned. Everyone stood as she left. Patrick was talking quietly to Amelia, trying to calm her down, but she was not listening. She was crying openly now, shoulders shaking, mascara running. Roy picked up his folder and walked toward the exit. As he passed, Amelia looked up at him, eyes red and pleading. Roy, she whispered, please. He kept walking. Outside, in the cold February sunlight, Janet was smiling. Congratulations, she said. You're officially single. Thanks. How do you feel? Roy thought about it. Ready to move on. Good answer. They shook hands. Janet headed back to her office. Roy stood on the courthouse steps for a moment, looking out at the city, at the snow-covered streets and the clear blue sky. He had won, completely, decisively, and more importantly, he had proven something to himself, that careful planning and clear thinking could protect you, that you did not have to be a victim of someone else's chaos. Roy walked to his truck and drove back to work. The next 3 weeks passed in a kind of peaceful monotony. Work continued. The medical center was days away from completion. Roy spent his time managing the final punch list, coordinating inspections, preparing for the grand opening. Amelia never came to collect her belongings. Roy had them packed and shipped to her sister's address. Everything carefully inventoried and photographed. Her clothes, her books, her jewelry, the small items she had accumulated during 4 years of marriage. He shipped it all. He kept the receipts. And he moved on. He thought about her sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. Usually late at night, when the house was quiet, when he was reviewing paperwork or reading or just sitting in silence. He wondered if she had learned anything, if she had grown, if she had taken any responsibility for what happened. Probably not. People rarely did. But that was not his problem anymore. The call came in early March, 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized. Unknown number. Roy almost did not answer. He had gotten into the habit of letting unknowns go to voicemail. But something made him pick up. This is Roy. Roy. Amelia's voice. Smaller than he remembered. Please don't hang up. He should have. Janet would have told him to. But curiosity was a powerful thing. What do you want? She took a breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't mean to. I didn't think it would. Her voice cracked. I messed up, Roy. I really messed up. Okay. Is that all you're going to say? What do you want me to say? I don't know. That you forgive me? That you understand? Roy looked out his window at the street beyond. Snow was melting, leaving patches of brown grass and gray slush. Spring was coming. Things were changing. You said you never loved me, Roy said quietly. You remember that? Those were your exact words. I never really loved you. That's what you said when you walked out. I was angry. You were honest, Roy interrupted. Maybe the most honest you've been in years. And you know what? I believe you. I believe you never loved me. Which means you spent 4 years lying. To me. To yourself. To everyone. And now you want forgiveness for that. Roy, I'm not angry anymore, Amelia. I'm not hurt. I'm just done. You made your choices. I made mine. That's how consequences work. I lost everything, she whispered. My home. My marriage. Mine. You lost things that were never yours, Roy said. That's different. Silence on the line. Long enough that Roy thought she might have hung up. Then she said, Can I ask you something? Sure. Did you ever actually love me? Roy thought about that. About the early days when things seemed promising. About the gradual realization that promising was not the same as real. About the moment he had stopped feeling anything except the careful observation of someone documenting a failing system. I thought I did, he said finally, but maybe I love the idea more than the person. That's sad. Yeah, Roy agreed. It is. So what happens now? Now nothing. You go live your life. I live mine. That's it. I'm living with my sister. Working at a bookstore. Caleb kicked me out after 2 weeks. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? No, Roy said honestly. But it seems like the thing to say. Another long silence. I hope you find someone who loves you, Amelia said finally. Really loves you. Not like me. I hope you figure out what love actually means, Roy replied. Then he hung up. He sat there for a moment, phone in hand, feeling nothing in particular. The conversation was over. The marriage was over. The whole messy chapter was over. Roy Holloway deleted the number. He blocked it for good measure. And he went back to work. Spring came to Lake Haven slowly, the way it always did in Wisconsin. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Snow one day and sunshine the next. By April, the medical center was complete. The grand opening had been a success. And Roy had 3 new contracts lined up. Business was good. Life was simple. The house was his. The quiet was his. The future was his to shape however he wanted. He never saw Amelia again. He heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved out of state, gone back to school, was trying to rebuild. Good for her. He hoped she figured things out. He hoped she learned something. But he did not think about it much. Roy Holloway had learned his own lessons. He had proven his own points. He learned that careful planning mattered. That documentation mattered. That keeping emotion separate from decision-making mattered. He learned that you could survive betrayal if you saw it coming. And he learned that forgiveness was not mandatory. That some things could not be fixed and should not be fixed. And that walking away from wreckage did not make you cold. It made you smart. On a Saturday in late April, Roy took down the last of the boxes from the garage. The one with the wedding photo. The old letters. The remnants of a life he had tried to build with someone who had never actually been building with him. He loaded it all into his truck and drove to the dump. He did not look through it. He did not feel nostalgic. He just threw it all away and drove home. That evening, he hung a new piece of art on the wall where the wedding photo used to be. Nothing fancy, just a simple print of Lake Superior at sunset. All blues and golds. Vast and powerful. It looked right. The house looked right. Everything looked right. Roy made dinner. He poured himself a glass of water. And he sat on his porch watching the sun set over Lake Haven. The air was warm. The neighborhood was quiet. And somewhere in the distance, he could hear kids playing in a yard, their laughter carrying on the spring breeze. Life was good. Simple. Quiet. And good. Roy Holloway smiled just a little, and he went inside. The past was buried. The future was his. And he had never been more ready for it.